Osborne. For those of you who don't know Michael, he's a former special assistant to the general manager for energy development at Austin Energy. He's a member and recent chairman of the City of Austin Electric Utility Commission. For those of you who know the work that we've been doing lately, we've been attending a lot of those EUC meetings. So that's how we've gotten to know Michael more. He has been a renewable energy and climate change activist since the mid-1970s. And in 1981, he actually installed the first wind farm in Texas, among many other accomplishments throughout the years. He was one of the 3 founding members of the Texas Renewable Industries Association, and for more than 30 years, he's been at the forefront in making Texas the leading renewable energy state. So we're just so lucky to have him here to talk about how we can work with him in our campaign. So lastly, Mr. Osborne is also a prolific writer. His book, Silver in the Mine, is a long-term comprehensive energy energy plan for the City of Austin. So that's obviously very relevant to the work that we're doing. So please help me welcome him, and thank you for being here.
Looks like we're rolling there. Hi, everybody. I feel like I know all of you, but there's some of you I don't know. And as you know lovingly, I call you the shirts. Call yourself the shirts. Actually, that was a nice introduction, and it actually, I thought this morning, I got up this morning and I went like, what am I going to tell these people? I mean, they know, they know what they want to do. They know what they want to get done. For me to tell you what I need to tell you, I can do that in about 60 seconds. And so I decided rather than waste all this time, I decided that I would talk about me. And so I was born in Amarillo, Texas, 1949. It's windy up there. And there's also good music comes out of it. I grew up with, Buddy Holly and the Flatlanders, and by the time I was 13, I had a really good rock and roll band. By the time I was 15, I had a really good rock and roll band. So part of my personality is because I used to stand up in front of people and play music. I had a pretty good band. We kind of traveled regionally, and so that kind of developed my personality. And then I went to University of Texas, and before I started off in engineering as an aerospace engineer, and then my brother said, that's just too much work. Why don't you just go over to the business school and it won't be nearly as hard? And he was right, it wasn't nearly as hard. And so I went over there and did business and marketing. And before I got out of the school, I started my own advertising agency called Directions Company. And Directions Company, I'm now like 22 years old, and I went out and picked up some accounts. I got Pants South, which is about a chain of 30 or 40 pants. That was back when everybody bought, there were pants stores. And I picked up the University Co-op. So that was my big department store. And then I picked up Armadillo World Headquarters, as well as a bunch of other places. But the Armadillo obviously was clearly the most fun of all of that. And there was one probably 1.5 or 2 year period where, if I include promoting midnight movies, which I rented the Varsity Theater as a 22-year-old every Friday and Saturday night, and ran midnight movies at midnight. And it was the guy I made the deal with. I don't know if he ever even told the owners of the theater chain what we were doing, but I was paying him $200 a night for the theater and charging about $2 a ticket. And every now and then I get 1,200 people in there, and so that was, I was rocking and rolling, and so having a great time, and then something changed in me. It was, I was selling pants, and I was selling selling concert tickets, selling music, And I thought, I don't know if I'm going to do this all my life. And Comet Cahootek, anybody remember Comet Cahootek? It was supposed to be this really big deal. This is now 1973, so I'm about 24 years old. And Comet Cahootek was coming through, and I got really intensely interested in Comet Cahootek. And so interested in it that I actually booked got a ticket to go from San Antonio to El Paso, knowing that the train would stop in Alpine, Texas at 3 in the morning, and the Comet would be in exactly the perfect spot. And I would get off the train in Alpine, Texas, and I would see Comet Cahootek. So I did that, and I got off the train, and by golly, there it was, just like I'd figured out. And it was so disappointing because, you know, everybody thought that Comet Cahootek was going to be this great comet, and of course you could just barely find it. You had to go out into the deserts to find it. And I decided at that point that I would start doing something other than pushing rock and roll and pushing jeans and pushing consumer society. And so I started building passive solar homes. And the first house I built was based on the design of an old Texas ice house. It was halfway in the ground, and I actually got the books out on how they built ice houses, and I just really built this guy an ice house and said, you know, it's Texas. An ice house ought to be as good as any. And it's been 44 years now, and that guy's still living in that house. And I don't know how happy he is. He never gets married. But that kind of started me in the solar business, and I read and read and read and read. I read every book. I read every solar book. I read every book there was. Because I had dadgum Bucky Fuller, you know, his Utopia or Oblivion book was just, you know, in my head. You know, I just like, well, we just can't go on the way we're living because we're not going to live very long if we go on the way we're living. And so, you know, Utopia or Oblivion was like, oh, have you read this book? You know, it's like this Bucky Fuller guy, you know, it's like, you know, the guy did the dome and all this other stuff. And I got myself in this was 76 now, and Jimmy Carter had passed the Public Utility Regulatory Policy Act of 76, and that opened up the electric markets to, quote, people who wanted to produce energy. They were called qualifying facilities, and I got appointed by the governor to be on the committee that wrote the rules for that. And you probably all don't know, but for many, many years, Texas had one of the most progressive net meter billing rules, and it's actually just a rule for qualifying facilities for if you had a small windmill or solar or whatever like that. Under PURPA, I had gone into a room about like this, and I sat down because I was trying to go to the small scale producers meeting, and I realized that I was in the wrong room. And I thought, well, I can't just get up and leave. Then everybody will know I'm a dumbbell. And so then the administrative law judge says, now, does anybody have any language on section 11.9-.8? And I said, what is that? And she said, well, that's the section on how large a qualifying facility can be in order to basically net meter. You know, and I said, well, yeah, I've got an idea. Let's make it 50 kilowatt hours. I mean, make it 50 kW. And she said, well, all right, Mr. Osborne, would you go out and write that down and bring it back? And so I went out and got to this is how long ago this was. I got to the phone booth and called Russell Smith of Texas Renewable. At the time, it wasn't Texas Renewable, it was still Texas, which was Texas Solar Energy site. I called him, I said, I think we just got a 50 kW net billing rule through. And he said, how'd you do it? I said, I went in the wrong room. So then I became a Solarex distributor. And at that time, solar was so expensive, it was like 50 cents a kilowatt hour. And so but I sold the little panels to like the gate guys, to open the gates and keep the the gate chargers working, and I sold them I sold them a lot to the railroads. You see them on the sides of the railroads, and I did that. And then at the same time, about the same time, I put in the first commercial wind farm in Texas because I knew all about PURPA, and so I became the first person to ever actually sell electricity, into the grid with my 5 wind turbines that I put up in 1981, and that was fun. And at the same time, I started a magazine called Spectra, which was this really beautiful, perfect bound white magazine. I was going to bring one, but I forgot it. And it was the official publication of the Texas Solar Energy Society, and it was pretty cool. But I folded that thing in about 1.5 years because I wasn't shooting money out in cannons, but I was shooting money out, with AR-15 or something. It was going out fast, and so I cut that because it obviously wasn't quite time. Plus Reagan had come in, and everything was changing. Reagan had taken the Jimmy Carter's solar panels off, and so it looked like, ooh, we're going through a dip here. So we started TRIA, the Texas Renewable Energy Industry Association. Russell and I did, and another guy named Warren Cole, who manufactured solar panels here in Austin, for many, many years. And he's sort of a forgotten person, but he's a real hero in the solar business. And we started TRIA. It's been around now for 30-something years. I began wind leasing for Zond, which was this wind company that I aligned with early on. And so I started going out to West Texas, and I started putting up monitors in West Texas and finding out where the winds were, and actually going out and beginning to take leases, because I was really, by that time, running the operations for Zond, and then Zond turned into Enron, which turned into General Electric, and I stayed with them all through that time. And then when they went to General Electric, then that's when I went to Austin Energy. And during that time, I wrote this book, Lightland, Climate Change and the Human Potential. And I just wanted to read out of this because it's spooky how things have not changed. This was based on as a springboard to write about climate change. I based this on the Theogony, which was a classic work by Hesiod. And the Theogony is about this great battle that occurs between the Titans and the Olympians. And so there's a whole big long poem called the Titanomachy. But so this is towards the end of the book, and I go, the Vice President of the United States, Al Gore, writes in his book, Earth in Balance, so that was like his first book, in a new common purpose. It says, whether we realize it or not, we are now engaged in an epic battle to right the balance of the earth, and the tide of this battle will turn only when the majority of the people in this world become sufficiently aroused by a shared sense of urgent danger to join in an all-out effort. He wrote that like 25 or 30 years ago. I went on to say, given that the coal and petrochemical lobbies have been so successful at blunting and perverting the clear and present dangers of the continuation of the burning of fossil fuels, it can be imagined that public opinion will not be aroused until the evidence is truly unassailable. The evidence will reveal itself in the continuation of scientific records indicating the warming of our waters and of our air. It will reveal itself in records of continued rising sea levels. There will be more announcements of temperature rises in the Arctic and the Antarctic. There will be announcements of large breakups of ice. There will be studies indicating the tundra is moving on and on and on and on and on. This was written in 1999, so this is about 20 years old. And there's some prophecies in here, but it basically, I said then that we're not going to do what we need to do, and there's a reason for that, and that's what I'm going to get to in a minute after I quit talking about myself. But so I went to Austin Energy. I did the Community of the Future initiative, and wrote this book called Silver in the Mine, which I don't know, 10, 15,000 copies of it went out. A lot of people looked at it, and it was a lot of fun. At the same time, Roger Duncan and I started the plug-in hybrid program where we got 10,000 orders and worked with General Motors. And to do, I wrote the memo that said, what we want is a car that goes about 50 miles, and then the generator, the onboard generator kicks on, and then went, oh, okay, because 80% of all trips are less than 40 miles, so let's build an electric car that can get 80%, because I'm a big believer in the 80-20 rule, which, there's a book out on that, but, you can get 80% of something done with 20% of the effort if you do it the right way, and the last 20%, takes 80% of the effort. So Roger and I did that, and lo and behold, we ended up with a Volt, and there were several out there tonight that I saw. I joined Mayor Adler and County Commissioner, I talked him into going, with County Commissioner Shea and with City Council Member who was it that went with this? I'll think of it in a minute. And we went to Paris and we went up to the Eiffel Tower and signed the document, the C40 document. And,
went with Leslie Curran.
Had hors d'oeuvres.
No, Leslie Poole.
It was Leslie Poole, yeah. And with hors d'oeuvres, with the new mayor from Paris. And there's another book called The Great Texas Wind Rush, in which a New York Times writer found me to be the most colorful. And so they wrote this book called The Texas Wind Rush, and Kate Galbraith and Asher Price from The Statesman wrote it. And they kind of used me as a character, because when I was a very, very young man, actually I just set up for the band up, my rock and roll band up. And we were pretty young, and we had about an hour to kill. And I went out and we bought 2 10-cent gliders, those little balsa wood gliders. And this is a true story. I promise this is not a Texas tall tale. I'm perfectly capable of that. I took this glider out and I threw it, and I was just, and the guy that I was with was my drummer, and his name was Smithson Mulkey Goodlett III, so I couldn't possibly make that out. And I took the glider out and threw it, and he does that loop-to-loop thing, and then it came down, and I saw it touched a little tiny flower, and then it came up and it stalled, and the wind was coming straight out of the north. It came up and it stalled, and then it went down, and then went a little higher, and then it went down, and it went a little higher, and it went down, and it went a little bit higher. And I said, Smithson, look at this thing. It went down, and it went a little bit higher, and it never tailed off left or right. It just kept bobbing and kept going up. And we followed it out to the very north side of town in our cars, and it never came down.
It's still up there.
It's still up there. And so that moment, gave me a sense of, well, anything can happen. I've seen it. And so, I've written books, I've made films, I've crafted policy, I've built hundreds, really thousands of megawatts of wind and thousands of megawatts of solar. I've created organizations, you name it, I've pretty much done it all. Why? I mean, what makes this happen? And I can say, well, maybe because I'm a Virgo, I'm actually a double Virgo, by the way. And the sun is in Virgo tonight, and it's a new moon, so this is double Virgo tonight. So this is the reason you get to hear this whole story, because I decided I would tell you just about everything, that you don't need to know about me. But the reason is because my mother used to say, when I was really young, she would say, Michael, you're not going to be able to change the world. You can't change the world. And I go, well, whatever. And then about the last 10 years of her life, after we put up, she couldn't drive through West Texas without seeing thousands of windmills. And she would tell her bridge club lady, she said, I used to tell Michael that he couldn't change the world, but he is. And then I look and I think, but are we really changing? Are we changing the world? And some of our leaders choose to disregard the truth as we know it. And we know it's the truth. I mean, we can listen to some of the leaders. We know they're saying they're telling a different story for a different reason. And the important thing is, what is that reason? And so I've been in this fight for 44 years. And I'm not the kind of guy that goes like, well, we got to give up because we're not getting anywhere. You know, because besides the 80-20 rule, I also believe in the fact that, you know, that every grain of sand, every pebble, everything you do on the right side, when you have a scale, the scale's like this, and you keep doing it one step at a time, one pebble at a time, one grain of sand at a time, and then one day it changes. And it doesn't change like slowly. All of a sudden it just changes, and the scale goes the other way. And you go like, well, golly, I didn't know that was going to happen like that. But it's like the ledge breaks off. Something, it gets to a critical mass and the change happens. Then we have today, I saw the United Nations, the new United Nations General Antonio Guterres, you know, warned that, did you see me this story?
Yeah,
Warned that the world is facing a direct, an existential threat and must rapidly shift from dependence on fossil fuels by 2020 to prevent runaway climate change. He called the crisis urgent and decried the lack of global leadership. Climate change is moving faster than we are, Guterres said on Monday. We need to put the brake on deadly greenhouse gases and drive climate action. And now we're running the pants off of our coal plants. Right here in the heart of Green, in the most progressive community in the state of Texas. And it's just as I told the mayor last week when we had breakfast, and this is just to make maybe 10 or $15 million, if that. You think about it, Austin Energy's got right at $700 million in the bank right now, and we're averaging $30 to $40 to $50 million a year in profit beyond what we need to be making, because we're trying to get up to all these reserves. You know, that's one way that we can tell folks why we need to store a bunch of money. And that's true in a normal utility universe. You know, you do need to get a bunch of money. If you got a bunch of old plants and you're going to close some plants down, you do need to come up with some money. So we're running the pants off this thing. I brought the actual production data here, but basically we've gone from about 3 terawatt hours a year. We're a 13 terawatt hour system. We've gone from 3 terawatt hour system back up to 4. So our emissions, even though we built, 350 megawatt solar plants, and we did some more wind and all this other stuff, our emissions have gone up because we are now producing about 15% more energy than we consume. And so when I met with the mayor last Wednesday, I said, this is hypocritical, because we can't. I mean, there's some folks, and there's some of them are on the Electric Utility Commission with me. Some of them think, well, we got to maximize our profits, and I'm going, well, no, we don't. And so I don't think there's votes on the council to run this plant, but the problem is it's not the council. And that's why I had a hard time kind of coming up with what I was going to talk about tonight. Because the problem is, and I know this from being inside Austin Energy, is that we're 50-50 on plant 1 and 2, but then LCRA's got plant 3 that they own by themselves. And so basically we are a little stepchild in that operation. And the guy that used to be on our management committee for Austin Energy, he would office right down beside me, and he'd come back from a coal plant meeting, and he'd literally be throwing stuff against the walls, because he was just saying, They, it's like they take a candy bar and break it off, and they give us the short one every time. And if there's a bill, they give us, they give us 50% of it, even though he said, we just get ripped off all the time. So we've got a partner there that we really can't get to. If they want to run it at 80% capacity, which is what they're doing right now, they're running it at 80% capacity. So it's a touchy issue, and I've got a solution here, or at least a direction that I would like for you guys to go down. But I just want to finish by saying that, you guys are great. I appreciate your. I love the fact that you wear those dang shirts. I mean, it just tickles me to death. And so keep bugging the elected officials. Keep bugging me. Keep bugging, my other commissioners. Don't stop, because every little grain counts. But I've been dealing with this a long time, and I was kind of like Al Gore at the beginning. I thought, well, you just show an intelligent person the science, and you say, this is what's happening. We're burning carbon, which means we're taking an oxygen molecule and attaching it to the carbon, and we're making, there's two molecules actually, and we're attaching it, and it creates CO2. That's part of the process that we're doing. You can also say oxidize instead of burn, and this is what we're doing. And then I would do a thing, this is years ago, this is 25, 30 years ago. I'd say, how many people in this room think that CO2 is 80% of the atmosphere? Half of the room goes up. Half of the room goes up on 80, right? How many people think that carbon dioxide is 16%? Pretty much the other half goes up. Well, how many people think it's 3%? Nobody left to vote now, And I go, no, that's argon, And I go, where we are right now, and this is, I used to say that, where we are right now is at 372 parts per million. And of course, we're over 400 parts, 405 to 410, depending on what season it is right now. And I always thought that if you just, I don't care if you're a Republican, a communist, or an Irishman, if you show them what's happening, they're going to go, well,
Of course we don't.
we've got to do something. But I dropped the line about Cahutek, Comet Cahutek, because if we as a society, if the scientists were to come out today and say, there is a comet coming and we have 30 years to prepare for it, I wonder what we would do at this point, because climate change, the people who don't accept climate change, they're not as dumb as you think. In fact, they're not dumb at all, because climate change is going to change everything. Everything. It's going to change the way we eat. It's going to change the way we drive. It's going to change the way we build our homes. It's going to change the way that we insist that everybody works. Really only about 5% of us need to work. I mean, if you really want to look, the way the society should be designed, it will change everything. And the people who reject it because they go, this looks like the end of a lot of things I love. Capitalism. Just keep going, changes everything. And so we wonder, the scariest thing I saw the other day on MSNBC. So, I want, MSNBC. And they pointed out that if you talk about climate change on TV, your numbers go down. People don't want to know about that bad of news. They don't want to hear it. And so even people who want to talk about climate change, the producer comes up and says, well, that was a really nice little chat you had about climate change, but we lost 10 points while you were talking about it. A bunch of people went over to Fox while you were talking about it. And so we have some really important built in the cake things, so that have to be managed in some sort of way. And once again, I think that, like I said in the book, they're going to push it off. We're going to push it off. Part of it's our fault because, if a child comes into their dad, if the child comes in out to the fields and tells his dad that the house is burning down, child's pretty excited about that. There's no way that you're not going to believe that child, because he's like, Daddy, 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 the house is on fire. But what we do is that we go like, well, the house is on fire. We go like, no, it's not. And you go like, well, yeah, it is. We don't talk like that child, and I don't know when the right time it will be to run out to the fields and get Daddy and say, Daddy, 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 the house is on fire, because it is, but nobody's going to respond to us until the right time comes. And I think it will be probably within the next 5 or 10 years, and we will see the scale move. And I thank you all so much for helping that happen. One step, because you know how to eat an elephant, right? One bite at a time.
Maybe Florence will help it this weekend.
Who knows? But I mean, what a horrible position to be put in to hope for horrible things. I mean, that's a terrible way to be. So what you guys do is the right thing, and that is that it's one step at a time, one pebble at a time, and ultimately things will change. And I really appreciate you guys for doing it. I really thank you very much. Okay, I've never given that speech before.
We got
That was brand new. So coal plant. I brought, and by the way, what I was supposed to tell you about is that Drive Electric Week is Saturday. Well, Drive Electric's been started last week, but it's in Austin the 15th, Saturday the 15th, 10 to 2. A lot of people in this room will be there. Texetra, which is the new transportation group that we started. The same people who did the renewables, a lot of the same people. We're doing the same thing with Texetra. We're going to build a. We're going to do what we did with renewables. We're going to get all the people in a room, and that's a lot of people, and we're going to come up with a plan, how to electrify the transportation network in Texas. And of course, we'll be working with the national and international groups, but we're going to do what needs to be done so that we can move, and it's going to happen because we're going to have a lot of models out there pretty soon. I mean, besides just the Tesla 3s and the Leafs and all the 3 or 4 really good ones that are out there. They're going to be 25 by the end of 2018. So there's going to be a lot of good, high quality stuff. I've got there's 20 colored ones, and then I also have a whole satchel full of black and whites because I wasn't sure if we'd be much over 20 or not at this meeting, but I've got a bunch more in here. But talking about the coal plant, you can see there that we're running it. One thing that I noticed is that when you just look at Austin Energy statistics, you don't realize that plant number 3 went down in 2018. You see that their plant went down, and you go like, well, maybe that's one of the reasons they're running the socks off of plant 1 and 2. I don't think that's right, but more information allows you to see why certain things are occurring. What I gave you here was very simply that spreadsheet that shows the actual production of 1 and 2 and 3. Then I gave you the bar graphs from the fourth quarter report of 16, fourth quarter report of 17, and the first 6 months of 18. And you can see that we're running the coal plant. But as I said, we need to put the pressure on our leaders. But I'm telling you, I'm convinced that the leaders we have right now want to get that coal plant shut down. And my task force, the generation task force that we did now, 3 years ago, our recommendation was to split the sheets, to get, instead of owning half of 2 plants, let's just own, one, all of 1 plant. And that kind of negotiation shouldn't be that difficult. But we're kept in the dark. I'm kept in the dark on where we are right now. And so what I said, I did have an ask of you guys, is that what I'd like for you to do, and I think you are doing it, just focus on where are we in the negotiations? Where are we in the negotiations? We're supposed to close it by 2023. Where are we in the negotiations? And you can't just continue to tell us they're secret, because that sounds like you're not negotiating. Where are we? That's my recommendation. Don't try to say that we're running the plant, too much. Just say, where are we in the negotiations with LCRA? Because we want to own our plant so that we can choose to shut it down.
How do they justify it when they say it's secret? How do they justify that?
Well, it's competitive.
With who?
Well, there's a statute. And it deals with competitive issues. And a public utility does not have to reveal, competitive information. It's a nice big wall that they can hide behind, or glass wall, whatever you want to call it. But they will say that if they have to tell you where we are right now, then that will put them in a compromised position in some sort of way. And to some extent, that's true. But it's not like we're, I used to be in favor, and I'm not anymore. I used to be in favor of just selling the damn thing, because it was worth about $400 million. And I thought, well, let's just, instead of being a pure environmentalist about it, because environmentalists want it shut down so that there's less carbon. That I understand. I get that. But I also have, especially being on the commission and being part of the oversight, I hate to just throw $400 million away, because, well, number one, that just makes me nervous, that we're not running the utility the most. That is money. I mean, $10, $15 million, I'm okay with, but $400 million, that's like real money. And we could have used that money to buy down and do all of our solar stuff and our wind stuff. And but I've changed my position on that now. Everybody else is just shutting their plants down, because they do know that the age of Trump will end, someday, and that carbon will be priced. You can barely run a coal plant now in this Texas market without carbon included. And once carbon gets included, like it is in Europe, like it is in California, it's like that's got to come. I mean, it's like Winston Churchill said, the Americans will generally do the right thing once they've exhausted every other alternative. So, yes, sir.
So if we sell the plant, and get the money, and then sit back and watch when the decline of coal makes the plant unsellable because nobody else will want to buy it. If we get to a certain point, nobody will buy our share.
Anyway, that's right.
Because they'll know this is a losing proposition. The plant is already losing money a lot of the time, in my understanding.
Well, that's totally based on the market prices. It was certainly true in 2016. The
Right.
market's a little higher in 2018. In my opinion, not high enough
To justify.
to run it the way they're running it. I don't think if they're making $1 or $2 a megawatt hour, I'd be surprised. I mean, because the cost of coal itself, just the cost of the fuel is, $16, $17, $18 a megawatt hour, and the market's been at 18, and so if you put any variable cost on there at all, which would generally be about $5 or $6, you would be at $24. But, sometimes even smart business people are, like your teenage son that's trying to run a taxi service to San Antonio and he's using dad's car and all he's got to do is make more money than he puts in the gas, right? It's like, Dad, I'm making pretty good money here, and there's plenty of variable cost on there that they're not including by running that. Yeah. Every one of those turbines, every part, they're all like aviation parts in a sense that they have X amount of hours that they run before they are taken down.
Right.
And it's very much aviation technology in the sense of the turbines, right? Those actually are, some of them are jet engines. So anytime you're running that stuff, you're picking up a variable maintenance cost, which, like I say, if you're a son and you've got the taxi service to San Antonio and it's costing you $10 to drive and you're getting 30, you're not really making 20. Because Dad's paying for the rubber and he's paying for the filters and everything else. And if you do a fair accounting of it, there's no way we're making money. Why else would everybody else be closing theirs?
Right.
But for some reason, LCRA, and there are legitimate reasons to run a plant on the margin like that. They could range from your other plant being down, right, which it was. It could be a whole host of things. It could be you don't want to cut a shift. You don't want to let those employees go. You don't, as a manager, you don't want to. Your coal guy bought too much coal. Literally. It could be something operational like that. There's a lot of reasons you might choose to do something like that. But once again, I, in my view, we can't get into the weeds of you're losing money or you're not losing money or any of that other stuff. My recommendation is that we stay clean, pun intended, that we focus on when are we closing it down, how are the negotiations are going, we have a right to know, we want to know. At least that's what I think at this point, because I don't think we get anywhere. Okay, Pat.
What are some good questions that we ought to be asking candidates at these forums
Right.
for city
Yeah.
council? Same as what you're saying, or other two?
Well, pretty clearly, obviously you want to ask them, do they support the closing of the plant by 2023? Right? Are we at 2023? I don't have an expert in here except for me, but I think we're at 2023. It used to be 2022. We let it slip a year. Do they support the closing of the plant? You could put a question in like, do they support it's a good question. We may have to do this offline, but there you could put a question in there. Do you support, I was going to say something like, That's too complicated. They're not gonna do that. So stick with, you know, closing of the plant, because that's where we want to get to. Yes, sir.
Okay, if we close the plant down, what would it look like? Because, well, okay, so you said the goal is that the plant closed down in 2023. Okay, so if it closes down in 2023, what is that gonna look like? I mean,
Well, my belief is that LCRA, oh, thank you, is that they've got the other full plant, and there's 3 plants there. So they can do what they want to do. You know, like I say, I would be all for selling our half of 1 and 2 to LCRA. That was my position for many years, and I had many an argument with many an environmentalist on that. And I think I've decided that, you know, I'm okay with just shutting it down. But I'd think real. I mean, if I was
okay.
the mayor, I would think real hard before I let $400 million, you know, slip away.
Okay. I don't think my question was actually, I don't think it was actually made clear, but what?
Okay.
So what I mean is, okay. I've never even seen the coal plant except from pictures that Al Braden showed us. So I don't even know what it looks like in person, actually.
Right.
So I don't even know I don't even know how that's going to.
Well, it's out in the countryside. It's it's on the north side of the road, you know, on the other, between Smithville and LaGrange.
Right.
You can't miss it. It's got a scrubber that's you know, 90 stories tall or something like that. You can see it from a long way away.
Okay. So thanks for describing it. But if we pulled out of it, what's that going to? How is that going to impact us or whatever?
Energy-wise, is that what you're?
I think
talking
that's
about,
what
energy
that's where he's going.
Well,
Energy production?
I'm just I really don't know what I mean. I don't know what I'm asking. I'm just asking.
Well, let me get. What time is it?
It's just 8:05.
Okay, because I actually have to go to a dinner here in just a minute, but I can chat for just a minute. There's a lot more than just generation here. There's those people in the building with the funny hat downtown, you know, at the legislature, and you know, we get to run. I'll get to you next. We've lost Joe Strauss. Joe Strauss protected this city and this utility. And why did Joe Strauss protect us? Is he protected us because he was from San Antonio, and CPS and Austin Energy are, you know, utility sisters. You know, almost all of our issues are the same. Joe Strauss, being Speaker of the House, made sure that none of those goofball bills that the Republicans were trying to put through ever saw the light of day, and because he could can them in calendars committee if he needed to. But we don't have Joe anymore, and until we know who the next Speaker of the House is, and that will have to be a wonderful. I'm working on it I'm working on it, but you know, to get a Speaker of the House that understands public power issues is going to be really a trick. I'm not saying it's impossible, because basically what we're looking for is somebody that gets 50% of the Republican votes and 90% of the Democrats. And, you know, they already failed for that once, and it'd be hard to imagine they'll fall for it again. But we need somebody like that. Or what's going to happen is that we're going to lose load. They're going to come out with a bill like the bill they had 2 years ago or even 4 years ago. They're going to, the R's are going to come out with a bill, and they're going to deregulate us. And we'll lose probably we're a 13 gigawatt system. We might lose 2 or 3 gigawatts of load like virtually overnight if they pass that bill. Now, and the mayor and I chatted about this. That's what we chatted about at breakfast. There's the scenario is this, is that there's no way that the Texas legislature can do us harm like that. I mean, we could keep them in court forever. You know, there's no way they can just do that. So they will have to pay a stranded cost, just like every other utility that went through deregulation. They will have to pay us stranded costs, but it will be that stranded cost payment that we get will keep us whole for the first year, and maybe this, you know, I mean, but that payment will go down, and ultimately we'll find ourselves as a weakened utility. Now, I say, let's put together a task force, and not a public task force, but let's put together a blue ribbon panel that gets in there and goes, okay, what happens to us if the legislature does this to us? Because of you know, if there's any certainties right now, I think it's pretty certain that we're going to be looking at a rough session, and come up with an idea of how we survive that as a community utility. And I think there are solutions. I mean, if they're going to come invade us, and we can go invade them. I mean, if we've got a utility that's got a good brand to it, you know, we can go out and we can sell our renewables, and we can market ourselves. I mean, there's a way to deal with it, but you can't be in the old utility mindset, you know, and deal with this, because I just see it as the end of the world. I don't see it as the end of the world. In some ways, I think it's a terrific opportunity to, you know, to brand Austin Energy and, you know, do the right thing. I mean, I think we could do that. But I'm telling you all of this because it's complicated, and it's uncertain what's going to happen right now. So keep your eye. You know, we're not going to know who the Speaker of the House is. First thing, we need to hope that there's more than 50 Democrats in the 150 legislature. The Senate's going to be important. How that breaks. It's not going to be pretty, but it won't be as ugly as it's been. I think, you know, talk to whatever political we want to talk to, but, you know, we'll get more than 50. We'll probably be 58 or 9 or maybe even 60, because there is going to be some kind of blue wave. You know, there's going to be some movement towards the D's. So we need a better legislature, but we really need to get a Speaker of the House that can protect, and it's possible. Because there's a lot of those R's out there, you know, are in areas where there are co-ops, and that's public power. And, you know, the public power people will stick together. So if we can, with all the co-ops in San Antonio and Austin and the other smaller municipals, you know, around the state, you know, we could possibly get this done. And if we do, then we can stay on plan A. But if we get an R that, you know, if we get a what I call an alpha R, you know, if we get an alpha R in there, it's going to be, we're going to have to really come up with a way to deal with it, because it could, I mean, closing the plant, more renewables, you know, everything that's in our gen plan would just be, they go like, whoa, that's just all out the window, everything's changed. So that's my big concern right now. It's got to be. Yes, sir.
Although it's not in our hands, have any of the potential announced candidates for the Speaker evidenced any understanding of the utility issues you're addressing tonight?
No, but typically the ones that announce early aren't going to win. You know, there's going to be an underdog type that puts together the votes without anyone knowing it, because that's the only way it really happens. Over here now.
Thank you for coming tonight and sharing
Sure.
that backstory. I think that's important from a heart perspective to understand. And I like the comparison to the child screaming about the burning house, because in a lot of ways I feel like it's me trying to burst the lid open on new technologies. And it's the reason why I'm doing what I'm doing, to use an elected official megaphone to do that for the entire world. And my question is in relation to closing the coal power plant and having a viable alternative in place, so we're not compromising public safety in the meantime, which, by the way, we do have technology that is far cleaner and more effective than solar panels could ever be, that we can sign a PPA with today. So I hope we can have a conversation about that at the Utility Commission. My question is, do you think there's any value when we have an alternative plan in place? And this is kind of an open question to everybody, if anybody's interested in being a co-plaintiff to sue the US government, the city of Austin, LCRA, and the entire fossil fuel industry for violation of our constitutional right to a clean planet. Do you see there's any value in suing them?
Waste
Depends
of
on how much
money.
money you have.
Waste of money.
Well, as you can see, I'm packing up on that question. But I've got an 8 o'clock dinner I gotta run to, but you're a young man, and it takes young men to do silly things, and get, sometimes that's what breaks the rock, sometimes. I've sort of turned into someone that just, I've gotten a lot done in my life by doing it every day. And a little bit every day. Just keep doing it. And don't get frustrated and just keep doing it, It's like,
One day.
you can't burn the house, you can't. The way that I sold wind power to the Texas legislature, I don't know if I ever even said environmental. I don't know if I ever even said it's cleaner. All I said was I was gonna make a bunch of people money. I just never talked about it. It's gonna be great. It's, I had to kill some language on my TexEtra thing on my page of my one of my communication directors, said in lowering greenhouse emissions with electric cars, and we're like, no, these cars are faster, they're
Sexier.
they're sexier, they're more fun to drive. Yeah, okay.
You got
That top, you can take it off so it doesn't fall off. Yeah, right.
I tried, I couldn't get it.
It will, it's just got a little lip on it. There.
So they're faster, sexier, and what else?
And you can pick up lots of chicks.
Did you see this? They're, we just ran a thing to where where was that? But that people feel better in them, and your nerves are better, and your attitude is better.
They're quieter.
Because they're quieter, and that they think that there's a relationship to the fact that there's not the vibration of the car, and so road rage goes way down in an electric car.
I'll vouch for that.
They have fewer moving parts.
And fewer moving
They
parts,
last longer.
and they clearly have benefits for brake, with regenerative brakes, you don't have to redo the brakes, you don't have to do the oil filters, you don't have to do all that stuff. And you're not around, I'm a little asthmatic, I love never being around a gas tank or a pump,
And you could idle at the public schools without polluting
That's
the
right.
air. You
can.
keep your air conditioning running.
All right,
So
thank you
that's a
guys
good-
so much.
That's a good plug for his program on Saturday. 52 down at Electric Road. So go down and find about all kinds of electric vehicles.
Thanks, you guys.
Michael,
Thanks
thank
for
you
coming.
very much. Thank you, All right. Well, that was great, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, he is quite entertaining.